Dr. Gene James. A doctor of chiropractic medicine, Dr. James has been in the Valley since 1978. His move here was his last duty assignment while serving in the United States Air Force. Gene James is a minister, a community leader, an author, a fitness champion, a husband, and a father of 6 children. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gene James.
Cool. To Priscilla, to Dr. Kenny, Dr. Hayes, and to all of you who made this possible, I am impressed. I had no idea what goes on here. The wonderful, tireless hours, the tremendous effort, exceeding expectations. This is you, and I am just amazed. I'm amazed. I have such a variety of things I've spoken on in the past. They mentioned ministry. I'm a minister, fitness, comedy. So whenever someone wants to book me for anything, they kind of say, okay, we don't really want the minister tonight. It's like, hallelujah. Nothing really too motivating, nothing too heavy. It's a sort of a light celebration, a little comedy. So I kind of had to think about how to blend it all together. So I think you're going to be inspired tonight. I have wonderful stories I want to share with you about my background and where I've come from. Well, I grew up in the South Phoenix. And from there, okay, you're listening closely, I see. Okay, I gotta be careful what I say. I was born in Natchez, Mississippi, a little small town in Mississippi. And my family moved from there to the Mississippi Delta, a little small town called Shaw, Mississippi, up around Indianola, all those places. So I knew I had some country people here. That's why I mentioned that. In the 60s, a wonderful time to grow up. And one of the things I really looked forward to when I was in the South was getting out of the South. Getting out. I think about that flashback from Arnold Schwarzenegger, get out. I wanted to get out. Go to the chopper. Get out of the South. And my mother, I'm being the youngest, wanted to keep me in the high chair. She just kept enlarging the high chair. And I wanted to get out of the South. But I found out that the longer I'm away from there, the more I embrace the defining moments that really made me, the things that I really look back on, and I can relearn and redefine myself by going back to certain events in the South. And I'm grateful for many of the adversities and challenges, and as well as the challenges and changes that occurred in my life during that time. Alvin Toffler said that the illiterate of the 21st century are not the ones who cannot read and write, but the ones who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. As I look back on my life, 1966 was a defining year. I was going into the 5th grade, new school. My mother sat us down. Oh, by the way, I'm 58. Because whenever I mention years and time, people start calculating, okay, 50, carry the 1. And you miss what I say because you're trying to define how old I am. My mother sat us down. She says, okay, next year, you're going to change schools. Now, Brown versus Board of Education has just passed, and it said that segregation in public schools were unconstitutional. So we're going to integrate schools. My mother said, you're going to go next year to the white school. And I was like, Mom, that's going to be great. Now, I'm about 10 years old. We'll have white friends. I go to their house. They'll come to my house, and we'll just enjoy. This is going to be wonderful. They can play with my toys. My mother just smiled. First day of school, I came home. I said, Mama, I don't want to go back to the white school. She said, what happened? I said, they won't play with me. Nobody talked to me. They wouldn't even sit close to me. Now here, today, parents would change schools. How dare you do this to my baby? And they'll send emails off and they'll sue. But my mother just says, okay, now get back out there tomorrow. And every day it was the same thing. There was bullying, there was name calling, saying, we don't want you here. And that was the teachers. And one day, it all changed. One day, everything changed. And that's one of the things I want to share with you, this diversity of inclusion, how I went from the back of the class to the head of the class, from being unknown to becoming well-known. One day, things changed in my life. We had an event a little meeting in our art class, about 30 students in our class. I was the only black student. I think we were colored at the time. I was the only colored student in our classroom. And we had to put together a project, just individual projects. We had the same supplies, art supplies, and do whatever you want for Christmas, anything Christmassy. And they were going to judge those and award the top three places at the end of the class. Well, I kind of put together something, I thought, nothing special. And at the end, we passed them over to the senior students. They had a couple seniors to come in and grade those and award the top three. Well, they awarded the third place, and people stood up and applauded, and the third place winner applauded and stood up. Second place stood up, and everybody applauded. And then the first place, they awarded, and everybody was cheering for the first place, and I was sitting there because that was mine. And I was looking real constipated. Teacher's like, what are you doing? Who is it? Come on, don't be shy. And everybody was applauding. And I stood up and then went like, it stopped. You could have heard a pin fall. And I recognized something. That award didn't go to race, or color, gender, or ethnicity. It went to the most excellent, the best. And I got hold of that excellence. And this is the principle that I learned that really leads me and guides me in my life now, my personal life, my marriage, my relationships, is that excellence. And excellence always rises to the top and takes with it whoever is willing to possess it. And I strive to do excellence from that point forward. I went home, I says, Mom, you wouldn't believe it. Mama, I love the white school. She said, what happened today? I said, Mama, they had these written, and I made this award, then they clapped for the third place, they clapped for the second place, and they got to the first place, and then I got word, and then they stopped clapping. I said, it's too late now, Jack? Too late? I was first place. And my mother said, now I want you to do that with everything. Everything that you do, I want you to do it with excellence. And I started to study really hard, and my grades began to excel. And every grade, every class that I was in, I was always within the top three of the grades. And many times I was the highest score. And what happened when it began to transcend this barrier between people? My work became the standard in every class. And whenever there was something done in the art class, it was always Gene's work that stood out. I mean, no matter how simple it was, they say, now here's what Gene did. Everybody would go, whoa, woo, they're high-fiving. It was like I had the best work, no matter how much it was. And it was defined by excellence. I started to do well in school. Then the other students came around me and they wanted me to help them with their assignments. So I had friends. And when it was time to take tests, here's the interesting thing. I allowed some of them to cheat off of me when we took tests. So instead of having this space between me and other students, when there was test day, there was everybody crowded around me. And I'm like, Mo, give the brother some room here. You know, and now I was selecting who could sit next to me. No, you move. No, you can come and sit here. No, you move over here. And I had to teach them how to cheat. I said, now look, don't write down everything I say. Don't get exactly the same score I get. On one essay question, I wrote down, I don't know, and another student wrote, I don't know either. So we were both in the principal's office. Well, I didn't know he was cheating. My brother was in a grade before me, and he had a different experience. Rather than living on his past, he still lives in his past. Rather than gaining the knowledge and information that I had and excelling, he still to this day harbors resentment and hatred. And he still looks back at that as being the darkest days of his life. The same experiences. One rose above. One remained in the storm. This was clear to me once I left LAX. We left and it was a storm and we were delayed from takeoff. And after we got onto the plane, there was a delay on the runway. We had to wait another half hour because it was really a bad storm. And finally, they allowed us to depart. And I noticed that as we were departing, it was like still really windy and rainy. And I'm thinking, this is going to be a really, really tough flight. But as we ascended and went through the clouds, I noticed that the sun was shining. It was beautiful. As I looked down, I looked back and I saw the the dark cloud, and the storm was still raging, but we were above the storm. And I learned that it's possible to rise above the storm. It's possible to not be stuck in the place where you're stuck. The ones down there were dealing with a situation and an adversity that they could not overcome. So when people tell you to simply get over it, they're really saying, rise above it. It's possible to rise above the storm. And the way I always did it was with excellence. Excellence always propelled me upward and forward. There's a friend of mine who worked for the state of Arizona. And he said he hated his job. And after a year or so, he said it was making him physically ill. So he quit. And for the next 8 months, he says he found 4 jobs. And he hated all of them. He hated the people, he hated the work, he didn't like where he was going. And he stopped and he realized the common denominator between all of those jobs was himself. So he called his boss back at his first job. He says, is there an opening? They said, your job just came available a week ago. He said, I'd like to come back. And he went back and he loved it. He was there another 28 years. He loved it. He didn't need a new job. What he needed was a better understanding and a better appreciation for the job that he had. That's excellence. Learning that what you have is really enough. There's new, not in something different. Different only means different. Different doesn't mean better. Better isn't where you are. Better isn't what you make it. Excellence always defines better to you. You look at these screens and the image that you see on the screen are not really on the screen. The image that you see is in the projector. And if you don't like the image, you can change screens. You can take your projector someplace else and you can go another place because you don't like the projector in this room. And you can move across town. You can move to another state. But as soon as you turn on your projector, you're going to see the same image. And that's what we do. My brother and others who's living in their past are still projecting the image of people and situations and circumstances that has happened in their lives. We're defined in our thinking by a few things. By, number one, our environment. Secondly, by our exposure and our experiences. And how we think about those things define who we are. As a person thinks in his heart, so is he. And we're not aware that we project onto people the image that we may not want to see in ourselves. There's a saying, there's something about you that I don't like about me. We can project an image upon someone and we won't like that person, but really what we're doing is we don't like the projection. We don't like what we're seeing in them. It's due to the projector. I learned this when I met my wife, Kim. I have the most wonderful wife. I know some of you are married, but I have the most wonderful wife. When I took my wife home, I was so excited because everybody loved Kim. It's wonderful to have a wife that everybody loves. I had a girlfriend, my first girlfriend I took home. My mother hated her. Yes, she did. And I was thinking, Mom, this was the one. Yeah. She said, she's the one for you. So we ended the relationship because I wanted to please my mother. Found another one. I know my mother would love her. Took her home. My mother hated her. And finally, I met a Southern belle. She was a spitting image of my mother. They laughed alike. They wore their hair alike. Southern ways. This was going to work. I took her home. My father hated her. You can't please everybody. But everybody loves Kim. Frank Lloyd Wright, who's in the area, was known for excellence. And one of the things you may not know about Frank is whenever he'd finish a work, he said what he saw was, how can I tear it down and do it over again? He said his next greatest thrill was if he could tear it down and do it better. And even in his later years in his life, they said, Frank, what's your greatest work? Frank would always say, the next one. You're not defined by what you've done. You're defined by what is still to come. Your potential defines you, not your past. Whenever people ask for my resume, I'm always a little jaded about giving so much information because I've done that. I know that the best is still to come. When I look at what you're doing and the great work that you're doing, it would be great that if this could just encompass the globe. What you've got here is really special. A web of inclusion that makes anyone that would come around feel good and gives us permission to go out and do more of the same. One boy came to his father. He asked his father, says, "Dad, how much do you make an hour?" Dad says, "Why do you want to know?" He says, "Dad, just how much do you make an hour?" And finally, Dad says, "I make $50 an hour." The kid said, $50? Wow. He counts. He says, "Dad, can I have $20? Dad said, "What do you mean $20? You asked me how much I make so you can ask me for money." He said, "But Dad," he said, "what do you mean? You think this is all you do? You come to me when you want something." He says, "But Dad," he says, "Look, go to your room." So the little boy goes to his room, and the father thinks about it later. He realizes that maybe he was a little tough on his son. So he goes up. He says, "Son, I apologize. I kind of overdid it." He said, "Look, here's $20. And the boy takes it, he counts it out. 40, 30, 45, 50. He said, "Here, Dad, here's $50. I would like an hour of your time." You don't want to ever get so far beyond yourself that you miss the ones that mean the most to you. Who could use an hour of your time? Who means so much to you that you're doing so much for the world to not forget the ones that really are the backbone, your strength? We tend to neglect the ones that we love the most. Can I have an hour of your time? We travel this way but once. So if we can make a difference, if we can help someone, if we can ease some suffering, let us do it now, because we will not pass this way again. The opportunity to make a difference, the opportunity to make something happen is before all of us. As you look around and you recognize that everyone is different, there's also our strength. Our unity comes when we understand that the diversity in what we have and what we share is what makes the world a better place. Celebrate who you are. Know that you make it possible. You give people permission to do more of the same. Don't back down. Step it up. How can you do more? How can you expand and enlarge your territory? How can you bring more people into what you do, inspiring them? Grab them if necessary, because when they become a part of what you do, it only enriches their life and makes their life the better. Make everybody feel special. Make everybody believe that they're the most important person that you know. That when you leave, it's like the salt that you place in food. No one ever compliments the salt and say, "What kind of salt do you have in this? This is wonderful. What kind of salt is in here?" It's always the salt that makes the food better. And when people taste something that's missing salt, it's clear. Salt doesn't bring much attention to itself, but when it's missing, it's clear. You're the salt. And what you do makes the world taste good. Thank you.